Well, hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. This time round we're delving a little more deeply into the Mercedes 600, which is one of the most mystical cars ever produced, I guess. It's very interesting. On the last video I said it may be one of the most filmed or filmic cars ever, and people have said the Chevy Suburban and other cars, which is all very true. But in terms of exclusive, expensive cars, I would say this may still fit into that category, but interesting subject for discussion. But nevertheless, there was no such thing between 1963 when they were launched and 1981 when they were finally sent out with their last hurrah. Was the Mercedes 600 was never a cheap car. In fact, it was always astonishingly expensive, and they were sold to some very interesting people when they were new. No self-respecting African president of any country would be seen dead in anything less than a Mercedes 600 or alive. So consequently, I think I heard somebody say that Idi Amin had 14 of them or something ridiculous. Thus, there's probably a fair chance at least one of them would semi or almost work properly. Because with fierce complexity comes even more fierce and frightening potential mechanical failures. Any car that makes a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow look simple has to be complicated, and this car fell into that category. So it was launched to the world in 1963 alongside the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3, which was sort of technology going back to the 1930s largely. This was their Maybach of the 1960s and 70s. They were frighteningly expensive, more expensive than a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, and that was before you started piling on the extras, of which there were plenty. So you could either have leather or velour, you could have a sunroof, you could have a Pullman, the long wheelbase version, you could have a landaulette. All this was up for grabs, provided you had deep enough pockets, which of course most countries, not individuals, did. So that was okay. Hugh Hefner had 2 of them. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. I'm going to clear the situation once and for all, really, because so many people have mistakenly said things about the systems on this car. So the central locking system is the well-known Mercedes vacuum system that was used right down to the W123 models in the 1970s. Very simple system, vacuum switch, which is operated by the driver's door key. There is a vacuum reservoir with a one-way valve, which is powered by the engine intake manifold vacuum, and when you turn the key, it's opened a valve and channeled vacuum to the locks to open or close. Very clever, very light, very simple, very cheap. So it has vacuum central locking. It has electrics for powering the lights, the radio, some of the air conditioning system, the fans, the circuit boards, things like that. But the electrics are at a minimum on this car. Nevertheless, because it was Mercedes and because they had no room to play with under the bonnet with everything that was going on, it had 2 alternators, the car, which were either side at the bottom. And to my recollection, the only 2 other cars I can think of with 2 alternators fitted were the Lamborghini Espada, for the same reason, lack of space, and the Humvee, which had such, I think the H2 had such massive electrical demands that it actually had 2 alternators, one next to each other on the top of the engine. But I digress. I think, and I'm willing to be corrected as ever, that this was the first ever car to have alternators on it as opposed to dynamos from new, from 1963. A lot of other cars, including Silver Cloud 3s, the Rolls-Royces, lots of different cars had dynamos on, the original generator type dynamo. This, I think, was the first car ever to have alternators. Please tell me if I'm wrong. I'd be very interested to know. But Mercedes were pushing the boundary on every available avenue. So we had, as I mentioned, we had vacuum, we had electrics, we had high pressure air driven by a single cylinder pump on the engine, a rotating reciprocating pump driven by a V-belt from the engine, and that literally pumped air into a system that lifted the car up with airbags not dissimilar to the type that's used on wagons and trains and things these days that simply act as a spring. It's like a balloon absorbing, and it uses compressed air to absorb the bumps. This was unusual, highly unusual in 1963. It had been used on the Mercedes 300 SE, the Fintail and other cars before that, but it was very rare to have compressed air as a suspension means. Mercedes-Benz had a system called Airmatic, which I think they introduced in 1999 on the W220 S-Class. And that was not dissimilar in concept to this. And then for the super duper hydro pneumatic next level experience, they had the ABC system. So Mercedes at the time, this was state of the art suspension, but manufacturers have now gone back to the Citroën system, the brilliant Citroën system from the 1950s that was used in the DS, the hydro pneumatic system. Anyway, there's your third element in play, the air suspension system. Then you have cables running from the heater direction controls on the dashboard to distribute between head and feet and volume of air coming in. So that's a fourth system on the car. But the fifth system is the really interesting one, and that's the one I'm going to focus on this time. I don't think, to my knowledge, anybody has ever explained how this system works, and that is what Mercedes-Benz called the Comfort Hydraulic System, or what they called in America the Fingertip Hydraulic System. It's very interesting. Some American manufacturers, when power windows on cars started to come in the 1940s, post-war, late 40s, some American car manufacturers like Lincoln, I think Lincoln used it on the V12 Lincoln Continental. It had a basic rudimentary hydraulic window system. I'm guessing that the windows lowered under their own weight with the aid of a spring, and then a hydraulic switch released high pressure oil and pushed the windows up again. So you ended up with the net equivalent of a sort of power window. Again, driven off a pump from the front of the engine with a reservoir. Very simple, but very complicated. Mercedes-Benz on this car and this car only, because they were stung by the complexity and the failings therein of this very complicated hydraulic system, developed a hydraulic system for this car, as I say, called the Comfort Hydraulic or Fingertip Hydraulic System. And when it's working, it's fabulous. When it's not, it's a liability on a grosser scale. See what I did there? Which brings me on to another subject. Mercedes-Benz, people have said that Mercedes-Benz never called it the Grosser 600. It was called the La Grande Mercedes in France. It was called the Grand Mercedes in America. I think it was called the Grand Mercedes here. I've never actually heard it officially called Grosser by Mercedes-Benz, but bearing in mind the other languages used a similar adjective, it's possible that I think one of the reasons why the expression Grosser has come along is because Mercedes introduced other models of 600 with the 600 litre V12 engine from 1990 onwards in the W140 600 SEL. Because they introduced other 600s, I think they decided to maybe use the moniker of Grosser on this one to separate it. And by rights, this shouldn't be a Mercedes-Benz at all. This should be a Maybach. But Mercedes didn't invent that super duper duper brand until whenever it was, late 90s. So enough of all that preamble. I'm going to talk now, I'm going to just have a look at the workshop manual and explain a little bit about how the Comfort Hydraulic System works. Well, what we've got here is another of the mighty M100 engine cars, which this started. Mercedes-Benz developed the 6.3 litre V8. Why not? They're developing everything else for this car in order to power it at a respectable level of performance, which it actually does in spadefuls. It does nearly 130 miles an hour, this engine, and 0 to 60 in around 9 odd seconds, which I can tell you was very impressive for a limousine in the 1960s. In fact, it was probably beyond compare. But anyway, I digress. We're going to just use as a bookshelf for our are looking at the brochures, another M100 engined Mercedes that we have here. We did a video on it a while back, the wonderful 450 SEL 6.9. So I shall now have a look at the brochure and the workshop manual as it kindly lends its bonnet for a prop. Well, we have, I've dug out some interesting things here, including an original sales brochure for the Mercedes 600, which I happen to have in the archives here. La Grande Mercedes. There we go. And the car is, as you'd expect, sitting at the optimal ride height here. It should be right almost through the centre of the three-pointed star on the wheel disc, the top of the sill strip, if you drew a line. And that is exactly how it is. And you'd be amazed how many 600s are not at the right ride height. It's all just very interesting stuff. This is Mercedes-Benz in full sales mode. And of course the cars were made by Daimler-Benz Aktiengesellschaft, not Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz was the brand, Daimler-Benz was the manufacturer. Here we go. But it's just a nice little. When was the last time you saw a Mercedes-Benz sales brochure? I almost forgot I had this. This is the Pullman with the conference seating. As I said in the previous video, for those who regularly wash their knees. So there's the driving position there, and then oh dear, somebody driving a 600 in the rain. And then here we have the 6-door Pullman seating, again with the driver's compartment there, the middle doors there, and the rear doors there with these jump seats, these folding seats. I mean, most countries ordered 2 or 3 of different configurations, as you would. But yeah, just a nice bit of history there. And then we move on to my trusty workshop manual, which I've had for 30 years. And I've made all sorts of notes in here over the years. Total 2,677 made. I've broken them down into categories. For anybody who's a complete 600 nerd, there's all the production breakdowns. The Pullman 4-door, including 32 landaulettes, etc. Here's the colours of some of them I've worked on, and the option codes. Everything is numbered. There we go. For the 600 enthusiast who hasn't got everything. Now I'm going to concentrate specifically in this very battle-scarred workshop manual on the fingertip hydraulics, as they are called. And here we have it. So this is all the things that the fingertip hydraulics controls. All the things. Shock absorbers, hardness, whether you want hard or normal ride, sliding roof if it's got it, central division if it's got that, boot or trunk lid, etc. It goes on and on and on and on and on. So what I'm going to do, this is all the, again, all the things that are controlled by it. What I'm going to do is start the engine on this car. I'm expecting the worst here, actually. But I'm going to start the engine on this car. We're going to gradually bleed the comfort hydraulic system through, and we can see how that's done. It's again driven by a belt on the engine, and we'll bleed through the hydraulic system, assuming we don't have anything rupturing or bursting when it gets up to working pressure, which is between 2,750 and 3,000 pounds per square inch. It's a special aircraft grade hydraulic fluid that Mercedes-Benz used, and this is conceptually how it works. You've got a reservoir here, pumps the high pressure fluid round, and you have the hydraulic switch. You operate this with your finger, and it opens little tappets there to admit the fluid to either side of this cylinder. So if you rock it that way, it opens this tappet. If you rock it that way, it opens the other one and diverts this piston either up or down. When the switch is in the neutral position, the pressure is equal, so this doesn't move. It's all clever stuff. Let's see if we can bleed it out as I say, I'm quietly very unhopeful that this is going to work, because they hardly ever do just go straight like that when they've been left for years, but we have to try. So let's go through the process of bleeding the Comfort hydraulic system and bringing it back to life. Well, it's worth mentioning, as we're on the subject of high pressure hydraulics and nerdiness, that the fluid that's used in this car, I've already alluded to the fact it's an aviation spec fluid. It's the same oil operating under the same pressure as the F4 Phantom fighter, for example, and also a lot of aviation, such as the HS-125 executive jet, which later became the Hawker, and I suspect a whole load of other aircraft, the de Havilland Comet probably, things like that. All sorts of aircraft used this particular fluid up to this particular pressure, but there's only one car manufacturer ever done it, and that is Daimler-Benz with the 600. That's why it was so complicated. And as I say often, what can possibly go wrong? Well, what we're about to do is something that, to my knowledge, has never been done on the internet. As I've said previously, lots of people have made videos about these cars because they are so special, but very, very few people have actually worked on them with any degree of depth. We're going to gradually bring this Comfort hydraulic system back to life and see what happens. And literally anything could happen now. We could have fluid gushing out of a door because a window mechanism's down. We could have the boot lid ram leaking, the sunroof. I mean, it could be just about anything. So we're going to be open and actually share this with the camera, and what can possibly go wrong, as I would say. We don't know when the hydraulic system, the Comfort hydraulic system, was last working on this car. So this is quite a big deal, actually. It's fearfully complicated, but we know every component on the car and what it does. So if it does spring a leak, I will know what it is. And I'll just explain what we're going to do round the engine compartment now. So this is the business end of the 600. There's a lot going on under here, different systems doing different jobs. The bit we're concentrating on is the Comfort hydraulic system, and this is the reservoir here, this great big tank, and this is very special fluid, which the Americans would call snake oil, but it's very expensive, and I'm not going to give away too much, because sometimes when we do this job there are intellectual property things that we would rather keep hold of than put in the public domain. But suffice it to say, it's special hydraulic oil that Mercedes-Benz used in this system, and you can't use anything else. I've seen automatic transmission fluid, all sorts of things put in this. Big problem, because it actually damages the seals in all the many switches on the hydraulic system. So we use the right fluid, we top it up, it then goes to a high pressure pump, which pumps it up to 3,000 pounds per square inch or thereabouts, a bit under, at the front of the engine here, driven by a belt, and then that pre-energizes the whole system to at least 2,700 pounds per square inch, 175 bar, and then assuming everything is okay, we then start to there's a bleed screw on the pump which needs to be done to get the air out of the system, and then this is the return pipe here. And what happens is, once you use a window or the boot lid or something, the return oil, the spent oil, jets back into this container. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a flush with new fluid. So we don't want the old fluid coming back into the container, so we've disconnected that. And this goes down to this rather large container here for all the old manky, maybe even wrong type of fluid. So this is the first time, we don't know when this was last done, but it's the first time, certainly for years, that we've tried to get the hydraulic system to work, and it could be a disaster. This is the tap. So the pump pressurises the fluid here, and you open this tap with the engine running and the pump bled out to allow the hydraulic pressure to infiltrate all the devices on the car. What can possibly go wrong? Well, let's find out. We'll start to energise the system, we'll bleed the pump, and we'll slowly see what happens. My suspicion is we're going to have a jet of hydraulic fluid coming out of somewhere, but we might be lucky. Okay, let's get started. So now we just put some of that aircraft grade fluid of the correct type to start the process. A little bit more. Well, welcome to the world of Mercedes 600s. I filled the container with some hydraulic fluid, and look at this peculiarity, this anomaly that's just happened. The sunroof has started to open of its own volition, just by me unscrewing the tap and unscrewing it tight again. As I said, anything can happen. That tells me that the switch on the dashboard, the hydraulic switch, is actually open slightly in one direction, but we'll press on. Right, so this is the hydraulic pump here, which is a single cylinder plunger pump. So I'm going to undo the bleed screw now, just a turn, that's all. And then we'll start the engine and it will self-bleed. Okay, let's try it again. So what I've done now is I've resorted to opening the outlet pipe on the pressure pump, which has the same effect, and we've actually got fluid coming out now, so that's all good. It means we can start to pressurise the system, for better or worse. Okay, let's open the tap and see what happens when we start to let the pressure loose in the hydraulic system. So now we start the process of constantly checking the fluid, seeing where it goes in the car, seeing if it leaks anywhere, and topping up the reservoir to keep replenishing it and getting the pressure up and the air out. That's another load of oil in there, the correct oil. Just opening the tap now gradually. This is good. The system is taking fluid. This is going very well. Better than it has any right to do, actually. Okay, so I've actually opened the hydraulic tap. Before I start doing anything else, I've closed it again. I'm going to see if we have any oil leaks anywhere in the car, any hydraulic fluid leaks. Nothing visible there. Nothing there. The boot lid's come up of its own volition. So, now what should happen now is if I push this in, the boot lid should close. Abracadabra. Okay, let's try that again. It might take a few moments just to pressurize the system. Let me see how the fluid's doing. Yeah, A-OK there. If we watch the boot lid, that should start to raise. How about that then? And now it's closed flush because the lock mechanism is energized. That is a working Mercedes 600 Grosser hydraulic boot lid. I'm going to leave that open. Again, I'm just going to go around the car and see if anything is leaking. It's a big deal if it is. No. Power seats, no. Look at that. The hydraulic recline mechanism on the seat is working. That's all high pressure oil that's doing that, every little bit of it. Right, we'll move on. Let's try this one. There we are. When these are bled properly, they should take a second to go up and down. Just think about that. 1 second. That's pretty well about right. 1 second, 1 to 2 seconds maximum. We'll do that one more time. Bearing in mind this is the 1960s, when very few cars had power-operated windows. Yeah, this is going very well. It's going better than it has any right to, really. Right, the next one I'm going to try is the sunroof. We'll see what that does. There we are, hydraulically powered sunroof. All high pressure oil, every little bit of it. And they try this window for good measure. Doesn't want to go down, but that's okay. We can adjust the switch. Yeah, something wrong there. I'm going to check the fluid level. It's perilously low, so we put some more fluid in it before it gets any air. No, still not happy. Right, you ready for this? The hydraulically adjusting back seat. Bring the camera over here, right? Assuming this works as well. There you go. All high pressure oil. How about that? We've still got, well, I mean, That's a result. We've still got plenty of work to do, but for the first time in years, this comfort hydraulic system has been pressurized and is not leaking anywhere. Yes, that is an amazing result. I really wasn't expecting that. Okay, I'm excited. There's one other bonus ball I'm going to show you here before we start examining things too in depth. This here is called a summer flap. And this was Mercedes-Benz 600 speak for an air inlet into the passenger compartment to help the air conditioning or not. Let's just see if the summer flap works, because that's hydraulic too. There we go. How about that? Well, having been flushed with success, amazingly, with the comfort hydraulic system, this window is misbehaving or not behaving at all. There's a lot of free play in this switch. It should rest in the middle, and you should have pressure to go up and pressure to go down, or back pressure I should say, and I can feel there's nothing there. So what I'm going to do now is take this door trim off and investigate that, and in order to do that there is a particular way you have to take this off. There's a particular order in which you remove parts. So you start with all the chrome trims here and work down. So I'm going to do that now, and we'll just, these screws are very subtly hidden, as you might imagine, being a extreme high quality coach built car. So we'll just take that out, and then I can't imagine this piece of wood wants to move particularly easily because it's been resting there very comfortably for a long time. But we start from here and work our way down. As expected. This is possibly the first time this wood has ever been off this. It's well and truly stuck. How am I supposed to cope with this? Gently is the answer. Oh, there we go. We're on the way now. There we go. So I shall carefully put the screws back in here just so we don't lose them. And then we carry on stripping the door. It's a bit like dominoes. Once the first bit of this wood comes off, you can get a bit more purchase on the rest of it. And that's okay. We carry on. Oh yes, that came off relatively easily, considering. But all this tape here is what Mercedes-Benz or Daimler-Benz put on at the factory, and it's all still there to stop the wood chafing against the metal. I mean, all clever stuff. Absolutely amazing. So we take this off now. Now that we've got the wood off there, this has got a series of clips, and this feels fairly loose, which just pull off like that. In fact, the clips, no, it has been off. So there we are. Chassis number, of course. All chassis specific because of the matching woodwork. So we move on to the rest of it now. All sorts of hidden screws, one in here, and so we go on. This was a beloved feature of Mercedes for many years, this sort of chrome escutcheon, to use the expression, around the door locks. And then this fiddly little piece of plastic here, which can be very difficult to get out in one piece. These are a bit of a nightmare. There we go. Now then, we should have a very loose door trim now. I'm going to take this chrome fitting off the front now, and I can tell that this has not been off very much because all the original screws are still there, and what happens is if they get worn through being taken off and on too much, the holes get enlarged from these self-tapping screws in the doors, and people have to either go up a size or, in extreme cases, weld the hole and drill a fresh hole to get the original tiny self-tapping screw to purchase on the door again. But these are all beautifully factory original, and they're tightened to the same torque, which leads me to believe these were done by an expert at the factory. A cheeky one underneath. Now, I wonder if I can get that off. There we go. Look at that. Look at the work in that. And the weight. Just a piece of bright work to make it all look lovely. Right. There we go. Disconnect the cigar lighter multi-plug, and there we have it. Now we get to have a look at the window switch. Well, here we have the hydraulic window switch itself. You've got the high pressure lines coming in, flexible hoses, and then to a junction box here, which turn into tiny steel pipes. And the window switch is limited by the amount of movement in this hole here. So if it is adjusted properly, what happens is this is more than enough travel. But what was happening before was the switch had a very odd feeling to it, and it still has, actually. It doesn't feel right. If you can just tighten right in on these are the two tiny little tappet screws here, which control the valves. So if I push the switch that way, it would open this upper valve, admit oil through here under extreme pressure to the piston under here that controls the piston moving up and down. And if I do that, it would actually open the bottom tappet and allow fluid into the other side of the piston to lower the window. But what I'm going to do, just for mischief, is move this beyond its normal travel in this direction, so beyond the slot, because I have a feeling it may work. There we go. There we go. Right. So what's happened here is that there should be a tiny bit of glue a special glue on there to seal these tappet screws. It's basically adjustable. So what I'm going to do, I can feel now that switch has got pressure behind it, so I can't move it like I did before. I'm not applying any pressure really, but what I'm going to do is adjust the tappet on the window switch. I know it sounds crazy, but we'll do it. And I've got this tiny screwdriver here. So I'm actually going to adjust the position of the screw, and if I get it right, the switch will be in the middle. Yeah, that's turning. Yeah. See, that's moving. Now that is lost motion there. So what I'm going to do is adjust the upper screw on this as well before I reseal them. I think that's about enough. That feels about right. Now a little bit more. And of course, the problem is these windows take no prisoners. There's a tiny bit of movement, free play in the switch, which is what we want. Still not happy with that bottom one. We can pull that up a bit. And as I say, if I've got this right, it will sit exactly in the middle of that hole. There we are. Right. And this system has got a pressure accumulator, and you can work the windows, if it's all behaving properly, you can work the windows up to 30 times without the engine being switched on. Just get this located properly. Very delicate, this door trim. There we go. And there we are. Look at that. Oh, perfection. So, now, just needs to come this way a bit so it can spring back. There we go. One working window switch. How about that? I'm very happy with that. That's pretty good. Yeah, and it's plumb in the middle. And the beautiful thing about the system is if you give it a tiny bit of movement, it goes slowly, because you're only opening the tappet slightly. But if you do that, it's quick. So you can actually regulate the speed of the windows by the amount of pressure you apply to the switch. We put some glue on those adjusting screws now. That's sorted. That is finished. That is an adjustment complete on the Comfort hydraulic system. Well, these windows are potentially vicious, and I have no intention of inserting a digit between the window and the frame. But what I can do is do the Wurst test. So we have here some classic Brat Wursts, and no tennis players from New York were harmed in the making of these sausages. And we've actually cooked them, and I'm going to see what effect this window has. We're going to do the Wurst test. Bearing in mind, what is the worst that could happen? So here we go. Ready? Oh, that's a bit vicious. Yes. Well, there we are. It's failed the Wurst test, or passed it, depending on your point of view, but these windows can officially be bad for your health. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll be back with something else very soon.